In this video, we are going to learn how to integrate AWS IAM Federation with Azure AD. Let's get started. First, navigate to your Azure account portal and then click on Enterprise Application, New Application, and then search for AWS Single Access Account. Don't confuse this with AWS SSO. Once you get it, name your application to your desired name. Click Create. And once it's done, we are gonna configure Saml 2. All right, head over to Saml under Overview. You can add your identifiers right there, step 1, but since it's auto-populated, just go to user attributes because AWS expects some claims, and those claims are session role, the claims are role, session role name, and session duration. Now, sometimes this doesn't always work, so you might have to refresh your page and redo the ones that didn't save. It's an issue with Microsoft. As you can see, I have to add session duration again. Yeah, just repeat the process for the ones that are missing. And I'll post all these links in the description below so you can see the claims that AWS expects. Make sure they are there. Now it's time to create a certificate, create a new certificate. Save the certificate. Make sure it's the active one, so deactivate the old one. And then let's configure our identifier. Now I do have another application here with that, so I'm gonna name mine too. But other than that, that's it. Save it. Let's download the metadata. Now we're done. Let's go to AWS. Create a user or create a role. First, let's create a identity provider, which our identity provider we are going to name AWS Undiluted. Choose your metadata that you downloaded earlier. Make sure there's no spaces. For the name, I don't know why this is so, but it's annoying that you can't put spaces, but it is what it is. Now that your identity provider is created, we assign a role. Now you can either assign it from there or you can create a new role. So let's just go ahead and create a new role. If you have one already, you can use an existing one. And this role, we're gonna call it, we're gonna give it both programmatic and management, console management permissions. For now, I'm just gonna give it for administrator, give it full permissions. Tag it. It's always good to tag your roles, but you know, depending on your environment, just go ahead and tag your roles. It's good practice. Let's name our role. I'm gonna call this Azure Admin, or rather Azure Admin role. Create the role. Now let's go to policies and create a new policy. This policy, we are adding permissions for Azure to be able to pull the roles from AWS into Azure so that you can assign those roles to your users in Azure. And as you can see, it's just listing roles for the permissions. Don't mind the mistake of naming this. I meant to say fetching, but I guess misnamed it, so don't mind that. You can name however you want to name your policy. So go ahead and attach the policy to the role that you've created. Now let's add some users here. So now this user, we're gonna use this user to get the access key and secret key from AWS to Azure. So this is what's gonna allow us to initially do a sync between IAM and Azure AD. So apply the policy that we just created, the fetch Azure creds, and go ahead and tag your user. Create the user. Now download this CSV file, because if you lose it, you only see it once. You can use it to, for further reference in case you close this page. So now go ahead and copy the access key. And you can paste this in a notepad if you'd like, so for easier reference. And now let's go to Azure and provisioning and get started with provisioning. Switch from manual to automatic provisioning, and then under admin credentials, that's where you put your stuff or your credentials that you get from AWS ID. So the access key ID goes to the security token, and the client secret, you'll put the client secret. Once you're done adding those credentials, you click on test connection. Make sure that everything is working fine, and then save it. This is a very important step, otherwise this whole setup is not going to work. Once that is done, go back to your application and you can start provisioning. As you can see, 2 roles have been pulled from AWS, and now it's time we need to assign the users and groups to these roles. So now once we do, I went ahead behind the scenes just for the sake of time, created one more role, and then so that I make sure that I have all the roles in there. So now let's go to users and add users and groups. Under there, you select a role that you want to assign, and those are the 3 roles that I've created that you guys didn't see when I was creating it. So select one, and then you can select the users or groups that you've created on Azure. So for right now, I'm just going to create users because I don't have any groups. Assign those groups to those roles, and when the users log into AWS, those are the roles they're going to be using. So let's test this application. Sign in as a different user or as you. Enter your MFA. Always configure MFA for other security. Now let's go to AWS and see. There you go, voila. You've got, if you can see there is the Azure EC2 role with just EC2 permissions, and that's how you federate between AWS and Azure. There's a difference. AWS SSO is not the same as AWS Federation, even though Microsoft calls it the same thing. Stay tuned for the next video for integrating Azure and AWS SSO.